thrilled to be here today with two amazing and special guests. So joining me in the studio today is Maureen Lonergan. Maureen leads our AWS Training and Certification program at Amazon Web Services. She is a passionate advocate for expanding education and opportunity to everyone, regardless of their circumstances. And before Maureen started at AWS almost 8 years ago, she spent time teaching school children in Mozambique, Africa. We are so lucky to have Maureen at AWS, building a training strategy to help people and organizations change the world with cloud computing and technology. And I can say that for sure. Maureen has literally built our training and certification program from scratch. So thank you, Maureen, and I appreciate you being here today. But I'm also excited to have a very special guest here with us. Dr. Tarika Barrett is joining us from New York City. Like always, we can be virtual or in person. Tarika is the CEO of an amazing organization called Girls Who Code. It's a global organization dedicated to increasing the number of women in computer science by equipping these young women with the skills that they need to pursue 21st century job opportunities. Tarika joined Girls Who Code in 2016 and has played a critical role in its success. She's overseen programs that have reached 300,000 girls around the world, more than half whom are Black, Latinx, or come from low-income backgrounds. Tarika, I'm so honored that you're able to join us here today. So thank you so much for coming live from New York City. Let's kick it off. And Tarika, can I start with you? Let me start with you. And I want to talk about the importance of engaging young girls and other students early. Before you joined Girls Who Code, you spent your career in education, including your time in New York City's Department of Education. Can you kind of tell us some of the lessons that you learned from your time in education?
Thank you so much for that question, Teresa. You know, my time at the DOE was such an important part of my journey that informs how I think about the equity work that I'm doing now. As you mentioned, I got my start as a teacher, and eventually I had the chance to work at the New York City Department of Education Central, where I got to design and launch schools where issues of equity, both in terms of gender and race, would be central. And it was during that time that I saw firsthand that our education system is simply not set up to close a gender gap in tech, and that problem has grown far worse in this moment of COVID. And you know, right now, so many of us are sitting, frankly, looking at all of this with dismay, this enormous digital divide that our students are experiencing, many of whom don't have access to the internet or a computer. That number is actually 12 million students right now that don't have access to the internet. And more than a third of our Black and Latinx students don't have access to either a computer or high-speed Wi-Fi. And we know that the issues go far beyond just connectivity. You know, we know that some of our students don't have the same level of digital fluency as other students, making it so difficult for them to keep up with the demands of remote learning. During this moment, as I reflect especially on what I understood was happening at the DOE, I am especially concerned for all of our girls and the ones who are girls of color in particular, because I know that many of them have dropped out of school entirely. They have caregiving responsibilities or other responsibilities, and they're going to fall far behind in their studies because of remote learning. And sadly, these are inequities that we know persist into the workforce, where women, and especially our women of color, have been disproportionately impacted by COVID and the economic downturn that we're all experiencing in this country. And so, you know, as I step into this role of CEO at Girls Who Code, I am so deeply committed and focused to figuring out how we're going to support these girls in school. We're going to expand this amazing career pipeline that we've developed over these years. And we're also going to support our young women as they enter the tech industry so that they actually persist and move up in their careers.
It's so true. You know, women in general were disproportionately affected by COVID, and then you take women of color and layer on top of that and all the responsibilities, and then so many now are without jobs. So I do see it as a huge issue, and we talked a lot inside of AWS. We're going backwards. We got to figure out how to stop the bleeding here. But I should say, congratulations, you did just take on the CEO role, of course. And just in your role as CEO, we discussed some of these areas, but of all the barriers, which ones do you think that are the most urgent that we should kind of start with and really address immediately?
Yeah, Teresa, that question is such an important one and a tough one because there's some complexity there. And first, let me just say thank you for your kind words of congratulations about stepping into the CEO seat. You know, this organization has given me so much and is such a part of who I am. And after 5 years of working at Girls Who Code, I have seen firsthand that passionate, ambitious, and diverse young women are absolutely the key to transforming our modern workforce and the world. But having said that, and to address your question directly, I've also experienced and seen that, you know, sparking this love and interest in STEM and computer science in our girls is just not enough to solve this pipeline problem that they continue to encounter. It is so much deeper than just teaching STEM and STEM education. Too many of the girls who we've taught to just fall in love with coding and tech end up leaving the industry because they continue to encounter these systemic barriers when they've quote unquote made it. Yeah. And systemic barriers are the reasons that so many of our girls are actually dropping out of computer science. And that's what I'm dedicated to tackling. So my work ahead looks like tripling the number of our free after school clubs that we launch over the next few years, you know, designing and launching workforce development programs and mentorship programs so that our alums and other young women know that Girls Who Code will be there to support them, you know, from the journey from school into the workforce. So that's a huge part of what, you know, I'm going to focus on. But I think the thing, Teresa, that is sort of the other part of this problem are our young women actually being supported once they get that first job in the tech industry. Yeah. We know that the cultures that exist are very much designed and set up for white men to succeed. And I think that, you know, it's good. And I think, you know, we'll probably talk about this. Companies are finally waking up and, you know, being reflective and looking at internal diversity and inclusion practices. But we know it's not enough just to say that. It has to translate into actual change. And so as CEO, I'm excited to work with companies, you know, in the field who actually want to meaningfully accelerate change in the areas of systems and culture that we know we have to dismantle.
Yeah, it's so true. And I think if COVID has taught us anything, we can break a bunch of norms. We can change the way we work. We can change the old habits and we can turn them into new opportunities. And I think for especially women, this is a time that we can do this. You remember they said no telehealth. Insurance won't pay for telehealth. This is an example. A norm was totally broken and we see that working in a big way. Why can't we change these kind of things now and make it happen? So agree with you. Maureen, you have been an amazing advocate for training and certification and for just women in tech. And the things that you've been doing, the skills, you've developed so many, I think you have over 500 online courses, yep. And you are really trying to make that accessible to everyone. Can you talk about kind of in the AWS Training and Certification program, you see a lot of these individuals come in almost for the first time and they're learning the cloud skills and they're developing that new muscle of doing that. Can you give us a sense of what that's like? What's the experience and what you see kind of as the outcome from these new muscles they get to build?
Yeah. I think this year has been interesting because we've had to pivot everything to virtual, but it's been a blessing in a lot of ways. So we've really invested in building out our technology platform and digital classes and virtual-led instructor training. But the design point, I mean, we believe we need to build the diverse workforce for the future. And so everything that we build, we want to make consumable by anybody that wants access to it. So, you know, we provide a ton of free training to to anybody who wants it through our platform. But we also have very specific programs geared towards women in tech and diverse communities or underserved communities. So we've got a great program called Restart.
Yeah.
We've been able to
that program.
We've been able to roll that out across the globe and reach so many more people. It's a 12-week online program that takes people from industries like the travel industry, which has been heavily impacted, especially with women, and gives them 12 weeks of hands-on training. And then we have partnerships where we partner them with companies that are hiring kind of young in their career talent. So it's been an exciting year.
Well, you did an amazing thing taking everything online, but you actually saw a lot of uptick as
Yes.
well, right? And a
Yep.
lot of in both. Can you talk about that a little bit in terms of the uptick that you saw online?
Yeah, so we had to pivot all of our training courses to online and our certification programs. And, it slowed down for about a month. But what we really saw was, especially working with companies and organizations, is they were hungry. There was
Yeah.
some time there to develop. And so we actually trained, hundreds of thousands of more people last year than we thought we would due to the digital capabilities, across all types of
Yeah.
individuals, people that were in the workforce, people transitioning their skills, people who had no tech experience, business individuals who wanted to learn tech, so it's been exciting.
Yeah. You and I were just in a room earlier where our individual running our some of our government
Yeah.
training, and we saw individuals in government just picking up because they couldn't get in and they were
Yeah.
spending some extra time training.
Yeah.
Maureen, kind of one other quick question. There's a study by IDC, Futurescape, that predicts by 2020 an estimated 30% of global IT jobs, 30% will be left open while employers compete for talent. And we
Yep.
hear that a lot. What are you kind of hearing from the customers are the most common IT roles that they need to fill in their organizations today?
It's actually all roles. It's not just limited to tech. That's the interesting thing with cloud. Like when we go into organizations, we're looking at building cloud fluency against all the people in the organization. We have great programs that are online and free, and companies are looking for this talent. But we do solution architecture, developer, security, networking,
Yeah.
databases, and so all of those. And we've really invested very heavily in AI and ML. We have 5 learning paths for that, again, all available online. So
Yeah.
that's what we're seeing. And I talk a lot to our customers, not only about developing their internal talent, because there is such a huge gap. We need to transition from traditional infrastructure, but also working with them to identify where they can bring in entry-level talent. How do we
Yeah.
partner with them? What programs do we have? How are we supporting our customers? And a lot of the customers that we work with want this entry-level talent. They have,
Oh, totally.
diversity goals as well, and women in tech, and so it's been an exciting year.
It has. And Tarika, you talked a minute about not just the coding skills, but the soft skills, the things that women need to learn, girls need to learn. Do you mind to just discuss that a little bit more? Like, what are you seeing happening out there where they're able to learn a combination of not just the coding, like you said, because they've got to learn to deal with all aspects of the work environment. Can you talk a little bit more about how you pull that together and things that you're hearing the needs out there?
Yeah, Teresa, if your question is about some of the soft skills and what we do with our girls and young women, central to our efforts in our curriculum is very much bravery, resilience, the
Love that.
sisterhood. I know we're laughing and chuckling because these are very familiar to us, but we forget
Yes.
that so much of what our young women are up against is that sense of that they actually belong, right? That
Yeah.
they have every right to have a seat at the table. So at Girls Who Code, it's not just teaching girls computer science. It's teaching them to lead and thrive in the tech industry, having them be very aware of some of the barriers they're going to encounter and the fact that they can lean on this sisterhood and what they've learned and the tech skills, frankly, that they've gathered to be successful. And, of course, on the company side, we know that there's work to be done to make sure that they feel welcome. And
Yeah.
Maureen, I'm so heartened to hear of your efforts and the work that you've been doing. So much of it mirrors our own steps to move everything online. But the uptake that Teresa just asked you about, that's phenomenal. So congratulations on that work. Our women really need that programming right now. So that's amazing.
And we know, like, the thing that we've really seen is this stackable credentialing, I think, as well for women who can learn a skill and then add to that skill. But what you said, it is just so important that the women understand they can lean on each other, learn from each other, and grow. And we do have to amplify, I think, and we have to teach them that it's important that they, building those muscles are not always easy, but you learn from building that. So, Maureen, I wanted to ask you a question about a group that's kind of near and dear to my heart, which is public sector.
Yep.
knowing that that the skills gap is large and that public sector organizations have to compete with high paying, fast growing tech companies and others in private industry, how do you think that the AWS training and certification can help public sector organizations meet their goal? And also, it is an area, if you look in public sector, it is one of the areas that actually does have a lot of diversity in their hiring as well, which I like to really encourage, because if you look across most of my customers, the Middle East is the example. You know, I've talked about that. There's 65% of the women are the ones doing the coding and development of the hard skills that are in there. But what are you seeing there?
So I think in general, we have to, just as an organization, we need to make sure that we're really training millions of people so that it isn't such a competitive environment, right? That's like job one for me. I think, you know,
totally.
Number one, right, is like get more talent out there in any way we can do that, whether it's through STEM programs or customer programs or philanthropic stuff. But I think for public sector, you know, I work with a lot of the public sector customers, and we talk through, you know, how do they think about talent development? How do they think about recruitment? And it's partnering with them and really understanding what their goals are and embedding learning into their culture. Because what we've seen is if you invest in employees, they want to stay. They want to stay with the company and they want to thrive, right? And so I think really branding yourself as an organization that is developer of talent and bringing in young talent is where they're going to see the most success. I think for me personally, I want to love the company I work for, and that's what keeps me here at AWS. And I think, you know, it's a big cultural transformation for any company.
It totally is. And you know, it's interesting because even in like a not-for-profit, they will say to me, look, we really need your help getting talent in the door. But they will also say, we're kind of feel like we're an engine for talent because we know that we're going to train, get people in, and they're probably going to leave. And I do think a lot of employers feel that they may get turnover. So they have to create everybody. Like you said, you want to create a platform that everybody's learning, not just the few. And, you know, Tarika, I'd love your thoughts on this. I have seen over the years, I'm always worried when my talent does leave, though. Maureen talked about staying, and we want to get them to stay. And I always say, if you don't have your data, you don't know, especially with women, people of color, any diversity, if you're not kind of understanding your data, then you don't know what's happening. What do you see in terms of when you talk to the women? Why do they stay or leave in a single location? What kind of inputs are you getting from them?
No, that question is a really important one. And Maureen, I couldn't agree more with what you shared. And Teresa, the data is so important. I would say right now, I've had a conversation recently with another CEO, and the most striking thing was when I pulled back and said, okay, this is your attrition data, but what does it look like across demographics, and especially in this moment of COVID? We have to pay attention. And much of what Maureen talked about, all of these things are intuitive and make sense around why folks will stay in a given organization. Maureen, you talked about loving where you work. It's strong and invested managers, you know, the ability to grow within a given organization, competitive pay, along with mentorship and support. This is going to be the thing that keeps anyone, regardless of gender. And at Girls Who Code, we now have over 80,000 college-aged alums who go on to major and work in computer science and related fields at 15 times the national average. As I said before, our focus as an organization is what happens to these young women when they are so excited and get that first tech job, you know, in the industry, and are they going to be supported? And so, you know, we did a study recently with Accenture and found that 50% of women actually left the tech industry by the age of 35. That compares to 20% for other jobs. And so let's be honest, we know that this is also about a culture reset in tech because companies are still not set up. All the things I started talking about that Maureen also highlighted, they are not designed with women in mind, and especially women of color. And this is what we have to all focus on, and something that I'm deeply committed to tackling, you know, as CEO, because it means we have to dismantle existing systems. And Teresa, you talked about this, and developing more inclusive ones where we know we can help women actually persist.
Yeah. COVID has been such a, no one wishes for a pandemic, but I think we all as leaders have learned so much. And I like to say you have to operate with grace during this time. But the fun part for me also has been days where I've seen moms or dads with their children or their parents where they enter the room, they're crying, or you're like, just bring them in, put them on your lap. Like, you have to be able to operate with some grace and make sure people understand that we're all human. And I think for women in this environment, it's much more challenging because they do, to your point, feel like they're being looked at and judged more. But I would say we also need more female CEOs like you, because we have to create that environment where women who lead also understand the environment that actually has to be created over time. Maureen, one of the things we hear this a lot, both internally and from our partners, is that long-term career growth that people look for in tech. It's not just the starting point, but the ending point. When you're talking both to the customers and partners about this and just individuals who get trained, what's your mindset on how we can create that long-term opportunity for technical talent? Like, how do we take those individuals and help them see that they have a long-term, it's not just one and done, but that's a starting point, maybe not the ending point.
I think there's a couple of things. When we work with companies, we really talk to them about create this culture of learning, right, within the organization. And that does a lot of things, right? So you want to make education, tech's moving so fast, they don't have the luxury now. It used to be you sell a piece of technology, you train them once, and it'd be great for a couple of years. That is not, and that's across all technologies, right? They're moving so rapidly. So I think creating an environment where it's easy for people to learn. I think setting up communities to help foster learning and have people evangelizing within the organization, put some recognition programs in for that. And then we also really work with a lot of companies on their talent development strategy. What are the roles are they hiring today and what do they look like in the future, and trying to embed training within those career pathings. We've done that with some really cool companies, and we've seen retention with those companies where they had huge attrition problems, and now they're starting to see that they can retain, especially like more compliance oriented industries like financial services, where they weren't able to recruit top talent, but now they're being out there in the media and they're saying we're investing and we're hiring, and so we've seen great success, and that's actually led to a lot of companies trying to connect and find how they're developing talent and retaining it.
Well, and there are, to your point, so many skills, telcos, again, 5G, all the new opportunities there. The digital call center, right? Individuals who work inside a call center now, we have all that in cloud, and they can work remotely. So if you equate that to women in the job, those are the kind of jobs that they can actually do also wherever they are. So I mean, it's so true.
I think it's also super important for companies to be super intentional about their culture and being inclusive, right?
Yeah.
It's very hard. I mean, we're women, you've been sitting at the table and it's hard to find your voice, and having leadership from an organization that is providing space for people to ask the questions and fail and be okay with that.
Truly. So I mean, so true, Maureen. Tarika, I just want to spend a minute talking about engaging individuals who've dropped out of the workforce, which again, you gave all the statistics, which are staggering at the beginning of this. In the last year, it's been truly alarming. The World Bank actually reports that the number of women in the global labor workforce is lower than it was in 1990. It's super scary for us, honestly. We were so excited about that we were going forward, and this feels so much like we've moved backwards. So now there's a large pool of talented women sitting on the sidelines. How are you seeing this, and what do you recommend to organizations right now that can tap into these amazing women that are out there that need to be brought back into the workforce?
Yeah, Teresa, the data that we have now, luckily we kind of move forward. We're not disheartened, but it's hard. In 1995, 37% of computer engineers were women. That number is only 24% today. So when you ask what companies should do, I think we need to interrogate the notion that we can simply, quote unquote, tap talent and bring them back into the workforce. And I think this is what we're talking about. It's what Maureen said, what you've said. The fallout that we're seeing from COVID, is a result of so many women having to make an impossible choice between their careers and their kids. And so we know that it's the women who are overwhelmingly the caregivers, and that's not going to change until we provide resources to support them with that responsibility. So when companies are sitting and reflecting about what true diversity and inclusion can look like and creating an inclusive culture, which Teresa, you talked about, it's childcare, it's paid parental leave, it's flexible and asynchronous work hours. We certainly don't need to go back to the negative things pre-pandemic. We definitely have some learnings we can lean on now. And increasing the salaries of women so that they don't have to make the choice between their career and their kids. Let's be honest, women didn't drop out of the workforce. They fell because we had no supports to catch them. And so much of this is an opportunity. And Teresa, you started by saying this. There's not a lot about COVID that we want to say is positive, but this is an area where we don't need to turn back and do things negatively. How do we support our women in the workforce so that they can persist regardless of industry and field?
Yeah, it's so true. And I do believe this is the opportunity that we can embrace to let women work virtually, have reduced work hours if necessary, or flexible work hours, because we have got to tap into that talent. Maureen knows one of the other big things I'm excited about doing is helping to create a sales tech training program, because I tell everybody we need a lot more talent in sales tech, which is actually also super technical. So there's all types of roles and jobs out there that we've got to encourage women to get going on, even if all they can do is part-time. Financially, it will be super rewarding, and we really appreciate all you've done with in your organization globally. By the way, I think you have a big sorority around the world that can we're going to be able to tap into, which is great.
That's right. Thank you.
Yeah, exactly. That, Maureen, I know I kind of, when I do things, I like to close in every conversation with an action plan. So we got to give some actionable things to do. How can organizations navigate AWS Today training and certification to get going? Like what would you say they do right now to get going?
Go to aws.training. We have, the 500 free courses. We've got very detailed learning paths. It's really easy to consume and learn from a business or tech perspective, and we're going to continue. You're going to see a lot coming out from us over the next 6 to 9 months, where we're using new learning styles, because everybody likes to learn differently. And so we've had a lot of time the last couple months to really think about how do we incorporate some of our own technology and make the learning experience a lot more interesting and so.
I can validate Maureen. I've read some of her docs. She has got some big and fun things on the way. And I'm hoping that we can work with you jointly, Tarika, to make this a reality for your organization. We're so excited about our partnership with you and want to continue to work as much as we can together to grow this amazing workforce of women. So I want to thank you both so much for joining us today for the Worldwide Public Sector Summit and bringing the insightful information you did and just your passion to the table. So thank you again, and hopefully we'll see you in person soon, Tarika. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you so much.